I'll start now. Good afternoon, Big Boss Charlie and panel of Big Bosses. It is with much hard work and analyzing that our team is proud to present to you our best imperfect solution to identify people in the general public who are at high, medium, and low risk of being scammed. Before beginning our analysis, we filtered out the missed reports where the victim did not get scammed. The most prevalent scam that we have identified is impersonation scams, namely the act of pretending to be someone else. Most of the scams occur online where the scammer has no direct in-person contact with the victim and instead engages through e-messaging platforms and social media virtually. Meanwhile, we defined offline to be direct, in-person contact at physical locations. Our interpretation is accurate because the nature of online scams have hence created a convenient avenue for impersonation scams to take place, making it the most prevalent scam.
Now, moving on to the typical profile of victims who are most likely to fall for impersonation scams. Before finding out the typical profile for impersonation scams, we first filtered out the victims of all other types of scams except impersonation. We then created pivot tables for the following columns with significant trends to enable us to come up with the typical profile that falls for impersonation scams. And ta-da! After filtering and creating pivot tables on Excel, the typical profile of impersonation scam victims that we have now identified is someone who is in their early adulthood, not IT savvy, favorite hangout place is online, is a Singaporean citizen, and either married or single. We extracted age into different age groups and ranges with our cutoff for early adulthood as 21 to 39 years old. 186 of them fell for impersonation scams. Additionally, there were scams the largest sum of money amounting to $2,338,630 in total. Wow! Next, we identified those who are not IT savvy to be a typical profile that falls for impersonation scams. We extracted the data from the good at computers and IT column while also using this to account for the social media usage and dating app usage columns. We found that those who are not IT savvy were more susceptible to fall for impersonation scams, with 183 people falling for them compared to 61 people who are IT savvy. See, it's good to be IT savvy these days to spot online traps. The favorite hangout place shows that the difference in the number of individuals who spend their time online or offline reflects the kind of scams they face, this table then reflects that offline scams takes place lesser than online scams due to the larger pool of people online. For citizenship, we have identified foreigners and non-PRs to be least likely to fall for impersonation scams. Lastly, for the marital status of the victims, we found that married and single individuals are most likely to fall for impersonation scams. Overall, our interpretation of the typical victim profile of impersonation scams is correct based on the strong quantitative evidence, clear analysis, and justification of the above graphs and pivot tables.
A group that we have identified that may be underrepresented is the elderly. We are right in thinking as such because the data is skewed towards individuals who are categorized under early adulthood. We suspect that elderly tend to not report scams given their lack of exposure or knowledge to scams. Another group that is underrepresented would be permanent residents and others, noting that the data may be skewed towards Singaporeans. This is given their lack of experience with types of crimes and scams to exist in Singapore. Thus, there will be an inherent selection bias in our data set.
Moving on, we shall now present our classification model. First, we defined high risk to be people who are very likely to fall for scams, medium risk to be people who are vulnerable to convincing scams, and low risk to be those with a low chance of being scammed. Our proxy measures for the classification model is based on the typical victim profile for impersonation scams, as they are the most likely to be scammed. We also base the model off our assumptions that the underrepresented demographic are indeed victims of scams too, but are unable to report these scams for whatever reason. Using negative justification, underrepresented groups are not immune to scams as 3 times more elderly victims experienced impersonation scams in 2021 compared to 2020. Using positive justification, the elderly are unable to report scams because they do not know who they should report to, are ashamed of having fallen prey, or are simply unaware that they have been scammed. While creating our classification model, we accounted for the assumptions of proxy measures. There is the assumption that age, whether they are IT savvy, and citizenship have direct consequences on how likely the victim would fall for impersonation scams. However, these assumptions we made are right because we used both positive and negative justifications to strengthen them. IT savviness and the preferred space of hangout were chosen as our first differentiating condition, as 84.8% of impersonation scams occur online. The end conditional is used because the consistent online presence, coupled with the ability to navigate online platforms, decreases the likelihood of someone falling for scams. Hence, they are both crucial in determining how susceptible one is to scams. We then followed up with age as we realized a substantial proportion of adolescents do not fall for scams, as they may not be facing a circumstance that incentivizes them to actively seek for money, hence categorizing them as low risk. For the above if conditions, we wanted to filter out low risk individuals first. Lastly, we used age and marital status to differentiate high and medium risk individuals. The stable income of adults enables higher spending power, making them prone to scams. The elderly are less likely to be tech savvy, have less social support, and are lonely, making them more vulnerable. With married people's conflicts with money and single people lacking monetary support from a partner, they are also more susceptible to scams. We use the all conditional as these elements are not mutually exclusive.
After incorporating the improvements from the last midway submission, we have now identified 341 people as high risk, 63 as medium risk, and 46 as low risk.
Lastly, we will conclude by discussing the top 2 limitations of our solution, yet convince all of you why it is still the best imperfect solution. A limitation is our group subjectivity in our thought process behind the solutions, which can be influenced by personal experience. For instance, we consider that those who use social media apps and dating apps are IT savvy, thus potentially overgeneralizing those who are IT savvy. Hence, we use logical evidence-based reasoning such as graphs and pivot tables to justify our solution and avoided cherry-picking our data. Social desirability bias is another limitation, as participants may put down information that makes themselves look good due to social influences, leading to low external validity. We also perceive that self-assessed information of surveys was accurate. However, a survey might falsely respond to avoid negative perception, leading to inaccurate classifications. A possible solution to mitigate this and improve the accuracy of our solution is to create surveys that can be conducted anonymously and confidentially. Despite the limitations, we still stand by it as the best imperfect solution because of its generalizability to the population. By using multiple and or if subconditions, we account for any possible variations and abnormalities in classification. Hence, we are confident that our solution can be applied to other data sets. Our model is also easy to interpret as we clearly defined and justified our solutions at each conditional, and also use conditionals that were unique to each level of risk to avoid conditions that coincide with multiple risk levels. Thus, it would have greater accuracy in filtering out data at each conditional, especially in detecting high-risk individuals. With our best imperfect model, we are confident that the police force will be able to scan for potential high, medium, and low-risk victims of impersonation scams from the general public. With that said, this is Team TE06-B signing off. Thank you, Big Boss Charlie and POBB.